Arthur leaned toward Casey, examining his glowing red eyes with a satisfied smile.
"Very good, my boy. Very good indeed."
Since there were, of course, no mirrors to be had in Arthur's dank cave, Casey had no idea what exactly Arthur was referring to. Still, the old man's evident delight left him with a gnawing feeling of unease. If Arthur was satisfied, that could only mean bad news for Casey. Soon, Arthur returned to his wall of poisons, gazing at the different colored concoctions around the room before turning to examine a few of his herbs. After a moment, Arthur selected another concoction, sprinkling in a few dollops of herbs and fungi before passing the vial to Casey.
"Drink,"
the horrible old man ordered simply. Casey could hardly believe the extent of the torture being inflicted upon him. He had only just recovered from the previous vial of poison. At least in the past, Arthur had given him some time for rehabilitation after each dose of poison. The old man's demands, Casey realized with a flash of unease, were getting progressively harsher and more unreasonable as time went on. Casey suspected that unless he carefully set limits with Arthur, the old man would be all too happy to kill him in the name of supposed scientific research. The thought made him beyond uncomfortable. "Arthur," Casey began tentatively, "are you sure? I only just finished taking my previous dose of poison. If you give me another dose so quickly, it might skew the scientific process if the poisons combine." Casey was making this up as he went along, of course. The truth was, he didn't know a rat's ass about science. And to his dismay, Arthur, who always seemed hot on the scent of the truth, frowned as he detected the lie.
"Now, that may be true, my boy, but I don't know that for certain, and I would bet my life that you don't know either. No, if I'm not mistaken, you must be trying to trick me."
"Of course not. I would never..." Casey began to backpedal as quickly as he could. He could tell that Arthur was in an especially volatile state. The state in which the old man was by far the most dangerous. He certainly didn't want to enrage Arthur any further when he was like this.
"Well, good. Then go ahead and take the poison. Let's see what happens, since you're so interested in science. And by the way, for this particular experiment, we'll want to fasten you securely in place. For your own benefit, of course. We wouldn't want to see you inflict any self-harm in this compromised state."
"What? What do you mean, compromised? What are you going to do to me?" Casey's voice rose in panic, and he watched as the old man brandished several coils of rope. His heart began to beat still faster. The man had never used rope for any of these experiments before, which meant that they were escalating to uncharted territory. Casey didn't like the sound of this at all.
"Go on now, be a good boy, and give me your hands. Put them together, nice and tight."
With another flash of alarm, Casey realized that the old man intended to bind his hands and feet together. "No, that isn't necessary." But Casey's protests were futile. The man was already coiling the rope tightly around his appendages. Casey, who was already trapped in the cave, his life already resting in Arthur's hands, was now even more helpless than he had been previously. The old man could do whatever he wanted to him, and Casey would have no means of fighting back.
"There we go. Nice and tight. I'm sure you'll agree."
Arthur stood back and examined his handiwork, looking unnervingly pleased with himself.
"Now, here we are, down the hatch, my boy."
Arthur stepped forward with the vial in one hand. He pressed the cold beaker to Casey's lips with a devilish grin. Left without any options, Casey once again tilted the vial back and swallowed the poisonous liquid. Almost immediately, He felt his body burning as if he were on fire with white-hot flames. He wanted to scream, to run, to claw at his own body until he could peel off his skin and liberate himself from the fiery agony. He let out a bellow of sheer misery as his vision clouded. Through the haze of his fuzzy eyesight, he could see what looked like a small silver needle that suddenly appeared in his hand. Then the needle floated into the air, piercing Casey through the chest. Ah! Casey cried out from the pain as a thin stream of blood shot out from his chest. Casey began to cough and gag, blood spurting from his mouth and throat as well. The liquid he produced was thick, black, certainly unlike any blood he had ever seen before. And when the droplets fell to the ground, they sizzled upward in a white mist. For a moment, Casey was certain that this was the end of the road for him, that the old man had finally managed to kill him once and for all. He pressed his eyelids tightly shut and waited for the pain to abate. Surely, death was better than the agony he was currently experiencing. But then, moments later, rather than feeling cold nothingness, he felt the warmth of a steady hand on his shoulder.
Easy does it, my boy. You're all right.
Slowly allowing his eyelids to flutter open, Casey realized that it was Arthur who was speaking to him. The old man was standing above him, nodding with satisfaction.
Very good. Very good indeed, young master.
For a moment, Casey remained shell-shocked, hardly daring to believe that he had somehow survived the grueling attack. But then, in an instant, his alarm faded into rage. He would not allow this horrible man to break him. "What do you want from me, Arthur? Are you trying to kill me? Would that bring you joy? Well, guess what, you asshole? I'm not dead yet, and I don't intend to go out without a fight." Arthur's eyes twinkled.
Oh no, my boy. I'm afraid you have me all wrong.
Casey balled his hands up into fists. "Oh yeah? Okay, then try me. Tell me what's really going on." Arthur took a long, slow breath.
I don't intend to kill you, my lad. If anything, I'm making you stronger.
Casey snorted. "Is that why you keep giving me literal poison to drink every day? Great way of helping me keep up my strength, dude." In response, Arthur just raised an eyebrow.
That's right, actually.
Really? You expect me to believe that you've been poisoning me for my own benefit? I might be new to this world, but I wasn't born yesterday. Arthur knelt down from his previously standing position. He sat on the floor of the cave across from Casey, folding his hands and his lap. Casey couldn't help but notice that the gesture was strangely congenial, as if Arthur were preparing to converse with an old friend.
I have no need to be dishonest with you, my boy. I've been poisoning you for the purpose of my own experiments, of course. But you also have been reaping the benefits.
Oh, really? And what sort of benefits are those? Pain unlike anything I've ever felt before? The rare privilege of coughing up blood and seeing stars? Thanks a lot. It's been a real goddamn treat. Casey was fired up, but Arthur remained calm.
I'm not suggesting it's been a pleasant experience, but pleasant and beneficial are two entirely different animals.
Okay, fine. I'll play ball. How exactly has this been beneficial to me?
Oh, I'd say it's been immensely beneficial, in fact. For example, consider the poison you just ingested. If I'd given you this concoction weeks ago when you first entered my cave, you would have been long dead. A skeleton on my floor. A mess for me to clean up.
Well, fantastic. Thanks a lot, that's really reassuring. Arthur raised a gnarled hand into the air, indicating that Casey should allow him to continue speaking.
But I didn't give you this concoction when you first came to me. Very deliberately, in fact. I waited to administer it to you until today. Until I knew you would be ready.
I mean, what do you want me to say? Thanks a bunch for not killing me sooner, guy?
I'm trying to make a point, my boy. And that point is, you may not be enjoying this process, but it is, in fact, making you stronger. I hope that with time, you will be the strongest killing machine in the land.
Casey was prepared to clap back with a snarky retort, but the truth was that the old man's words caught him off guard. He had to admit that it seemed plausible that he was gaining strength and power. His cultivation through ingesting poison seemed to be progressing much more quickly than any cultivation of magic ever could. And it was true that in this world, he would take all the power he could get. After all, he might need it to survive. Arthur seemed to take Casey's silence as an indication to continue.
And now, I would like to ask you an important question. I believe you can see my value to you now, and I would like to ask you to take me as your master.
Casey was irritated, but not exactly surprised by the question. Of course, this power-hungry old man wanted Casey to formally agree to become his indentured servant. He considered his options. He could protest, which was what he really wanted to do. But what would be the point? He was already living in the man's cave, at least informally in servitude to the man already. Thinking quickly, he realized that if perhaps he agreed to team up with the possibly insane individual, maybe the man would treat him as if they were allies. Given his current situation, Casey really had more to gain than he had to lose. Things could only get better from here. Although Casey still hated the man deep down inside, he did his best to plaster on a complacent smile. Sure, fine. I'll take you as my master. But in return, I have a few asks of my own. Arthur raised an eyebrow, looking pleased and amused.
Go on.
First of all, I want to be able to go outside. I'm sick of being stuck with you in your smelly cave filled with toxic substances. It's awful in here. Arthur considered the request and then shrugged.
I'll allow you to go outside, fine, but only with supervision.
Casey nodded. As much as he might have loved to go outside unsupervised and make a run for it, he knew at this point that the old man wasn't an idiot, and he had planned for this response. Deal. And then second, I want to know what this is all about. Why are you pumping me full of poison as if I'm your secret weapon? What exactly is your end goal? At this, the elderly man let out a long sigh.
Oh. Are you ready for a history lesson?
Once again, Casey nodded, although he didn't really know what Arthur was driving at. Arthur folded his hands in his lap as if settling in for a long discussion.
Well, I've told you that the name of the territory in which we reside is called Toxic Gate. Can I assume you recall that particular tidbit?
Sure, go on.
All right, then. Well, the world in which we reside is technically divided into 4 areas. The Central Plains, the Western Plains, the Northern Snow Mountain Temple, and the Southeast Sea area. We happen to live in the Central Plains, which is divided into 9 sects, one of them being Toxic Gate.
Casey motioned for Arthur to continue. The truth was that this was valuable context. He almost wished he had asked the old man to explain this all sooner. Arthur, for his part, seems to be enjoying giving the history lesson.
In a previous world, well before you were born, Toxic Gate reached a threshold of greatness, and it was the most powerful sect of the 9.
Casey looked out into the barren land beyond. It hardly seemed like a great world. So, what happened? Arthur heaved a sigh that seemed to Casey like it was filled with genuine sorrow.
Oh, sadly, the sect leaders of the other 8 sects were also quite powerful. As the leader of Toxic Gate, I fought against them. In my prime, I was stronger than any one of these individuals alone. But as it stood, it was 1 against 8. I ultimately was able to fend them off before they overtook me and our land. But of course, the attacks left me quite weakened. And I believe there are not many days left until they will rise again.
And why are they attacking Toxic Gate? Casey had to admit that the story was interesting to him. And the context of Arthur fighting against the enemies at least helped to justify why he was so dead set on turning Casey into a human killing machine. Arthur shrugged a bit helplessly.
Why does anyone attack anyone else? Power, greed, the usual suspects. Back in its prime, Toxic Gate was robust, strong. We had made brilliant achievements in war. I believe the other 8 sects are afraid of our Toxic Gate dominating the Central Plains. They want to eliminate us, so that we will not be a threat to their domain any longer.
Arthur's voice had now begun to shake with emotion and rage.
They are scum, my lad. They are a group of treacherous villains.
As the flash of anger overtook Arthur, he opened up his hands until his palms were facing the roof of the cave. With alarm, Casey realized that Arthur was so upset that he seemed to have lost control of his own body, of the magic that flowed within his veins. Casey had never seen the old man like this before. Arthur was usually so controlled, and it frightened Casey to see his master lose himself to such a moment of rage. Suddenly, Arthur's body began to levitate in midair, flickering with flashes of green that reminded Casey uncannily of the bolt of lightning that had struck him and brought him to this land in the first place. Arthur flicked his palms, and what looked like the shadow of a green handprint fluttered out into the air. Smash! With an audible crash, the handprint smashed into the mountain wall inside of the cave.